Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Zanu PF is rigging the 2023 elections. I think this story must be said again and again and again so that no one, absolutely no one, can say they didn't know. Yes, the opposition, that is the story they do not want to hear. They want to spread their own alternative narrative that Triple C is winning big. And they ignore everything that is saying to the contrary. I would like to remind you of how Zanu PF rigged the 2018 elections, as explained by the former Zanu PF Politburo member, Professor Jonathan Moyo. Just listen to this.
Is the mother of the rigging, and Malaba is the father of the rigging, endorsed what the mother was doing. It is actually scandalous. You see, ZEC is not supposed to be controlled by any authority.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
independent. It is an independent constitutional body. In fact, independent commission. It's a Chapter 12 institution. But the ZEC did not run anything important. It never did. The computers were run by Africom. The registration, accreditation, and so forth were run by a CIO company. So between the CIO and the army, they ran the processes, the operations, using their instruments. Either Matanga, who is actually active, she's employed, she joined the, she was not joined, she was seconded to the electoral body in 2008 as a divisional intelligence officer. Now she is a director in the CIO. As we speak right now, she's a director, and she was congratulated and rewarded for rigging the 2018 election. And she was given a house in Borodale, a posh mansion in there. So there is a serious problem that whereas on paper, ZEC is supposed to be an independent constitutional body that runs elections transparently, efficiently, and impartially. No, it doesn't. It doesn't because it does not even itself run. The elections are run for ZEC by the securocrat.
There we have it. There is an explanation of how Zanu PF is rigging the elections. We cannot deny that this is a serious problem. And I think this is where our problem starts. We have the opposition that have got a very selective amnesia, selective memory. You tell them what they don't want to hear, it leaks out completely. You tell them what they want to hear, and it sticks. Any narrative that says Zanu PF is rigging these elections, the opposition forgets it immediately. Any narrative that says Triple C is going to win big, it's saved in their collective memory, in the read-only memory, part of the memory, so that you can't even delete it. It will also, of course, it will all be deleted the morning after the voting is done, when for the first time, they will remember that, or rather, they will claim Zanu PF rigged the elections. And they'll come up with all manner of how the elections were rigged. as if this is the first time ever they've had anyone speak about any possibility of rigging, of the elections being rigged. A few months down the line, they'll be coming up with strategies on how they could have won those elections. And one of the most common one, of course, is if we are united as the opposition, and we mobilize our base and mass voter registration, followed by mass voting, and then we protect the vote, Zanu PF will never win the elections. It's all nonsense, of course. What Professor Jonathan Moyo was explaining there is how ZEC itself is just a body where Justice Priscilla Chigumba and their mates in ZEC are just bodies who are supposed to do what they're told. They do not do anything important as far as the election process is concerned. Anything critical and important is done for them. And those who are doing it are Zanu PF appointees. How can Zanu PF lose an election in which it has got absolutely total control of all the key aspects of the election process? Take, for instance, this issue of the voters' roll. On Wednesday is nomination day. The law of the land says ZEC should produce a verified voters' roll at least one calendar month before nomination day. They haven't done so. Even after the 1 week quick inspection, which picked up so many errors and so forth, ZEC said, oh, they will get the mistakes corrected. They have admitted that they haven't corrected those mistakes. And there's no available voters' roll until after the nomination is done. In other words, all the contestants are going in there, getting their nominations in on the basis of a voters' roll, which ZEC itself will never say, oh, this is the verified voters' roll. Only when you have successfully been nominated, you'll probably be given a hard copy of a verified, of what they will call a verified voters' roll. This is all deliberate. A hard copy, you cannot cross-check it. It will be carefully edited so that some of the blatant errors are not there. And most of the people who are going to vote come the 23rd of August will not be on that printed hard copy of the voters' roll. Zanu PF has always registered its members the last few months before the election itself, for the simple reason that it doesn't want their names appear on the hard copy or any of the voters' roll that will be available to the public. That way, they will turn around and say, oh no, those who registered late, we could not get them on the voters' roll. But they will be allowed to vote using their voter registration slips. And of course, it would have been arranged with ZEC, or those ZEC appointed officials who are responsible for producing the voters' roll, to register those members. Some of them were passed in from as far afield as Lomboshawa and Koromons in the rural constituencies into the urban centers in Harare to register. When they are passed in like that, the ZEC officials will know well in advance that these people, you cannot ask them for where they stay in Harare, because they don't stay in Harare. You register them on the basis of whatever they would have been informed. And those people, when they register, they will say whatever they're supposed to be, would have been briefed well in advance. And we have seen in the past those people being passed in to come and register to vote, register to vote, and then when voting day comes, they come in and vote. So, of course, they would have voted in their rural constituency, and then they're passed in the urban centers to vote. This is only possible because Zanu PF operatives control the voter registration process. The copies of the voters' roll that are circulating, they are known by these operatives. Whatever is posted out there, they will know. Whatever will be used on the day itself, they would know. And Zanu PF candidates would know. Zanu PF candidates will get a voters' roll that will also tell them, their members, which polling station they should go to. Opposition members will get a voters' roll that has got only the names. Doesn't tell you which polling station you should go. And most of the opposition supporters will find themselves going to a polling station, finding their name is not on the voters' roll. And so they're not able to vote. And I can tell you, if one had to keep a record of the people who vote in these elections using voter registration slips alone, I think it will be another eye-opener. But all this information showing clearly that Zanu PF is rigging the elections, the opposition do not want to know it. Their collective selective amnesia does not allow them to remember that such information. The funny part of it is opposition leaders, members like Tendai Biti and David Coulthard, have themselves admitted that it is just a futile exercise participating in these elections, because Zanu PF is rigging the elections. And by participating, all they're doing is give Zanu PF legitimacy. Even those two guys, after they've admitted it, they've went on to participate. Why? As David Coulthard himself admitted, because of greed. They were after the few seats they know Zanu PF has got to give away to the opposition, because the Zanu PF also wants to give the impression to the world that Zimbabwe is a healthy and functioning democracy, a multi-party democratic country. And so they just got to have a few opposition members elected into parliament. The process itself is geared to make sure that it secures the Zanu PF majority, preferably 2/3 majority in parliament and in the Senate. And of course, it also secures presidential victory for Zanu PF. To entice the opposition to keep participating, the benefits of being an MP have been increasing in leaps and bounds. At the present moment, any elected member of parliament after the 24th of August will get US $80,000 a car allowance, tax-free. And I don't think they even pay duty on the car if they were to import it. So they don't pay all those other extra charges that all other motors have got to pay. They get all those benefits. Even if they were in the present parliament now, they'll still get that 80,000 car allowance. As of November last year, MPs and senators got a housing allowance of $40,000 US. Ministers and deputy ministers got $500,000 US and deputy ministers $350,000 US. Plus all the other benefits, the generous salary, the generous allowances that MPs and senators get. And no wonder opposition parties are falling all over each other to make sure that they get their nomination papers. To tell them, you should be protesting and saying we cannot have free and fair elections without a verified voters roll is a waste of time. These opposition candidates do not want to hear that. It's filtered out. You tell them that, they hear it, goes in one ear, out the other. They don't want to hear that. They are going to fight for those few seats. Whether or not that will give Zanu PF legitimacy, they don't care about that. So these elections are going ahead. The opposition are hell-bent in participating in these elections. This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. They know by participating they give Zanu PF legitimacy. And by participating they give SADC leaders the excuse to grant Zanu PF legitimacy. And Zanu PF would have been encouraged by the noise coming from across the Limpopo in South Africa. The ANC government in South Africa made a party congress resolution last November that they would not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. And by that they mean Zanu PF can go ahead and rig the elections and ANC will do them the favor of pretending those elections were free, fair, and credible, and thus grant Zanu PF political legitimacy. So when some of us are saying these elections are going to be rigged, look what Zanu PF doing. SADC leaders themselves, particularly South Africa, and South Africa is the dominant partner in SADC, there's no doubt about it, that whatever South Africa is pushing for, they will get it. So all the other SADC members, if South Africa was to stand up and say, well, the elections were substantially free, fair, and credible, it doesn't matter. The fact that we didn't have a verified voters roll, the public media is not free and fair. The ordinary voters, particularly in the rural areas, were frog marched to vote for Zanu PF. All those things, you can tell South Africa, they don't want to know that as well. South Africa's argument, actually, or ANC rather, the ANC government's argument is that Zimbabwe is under sanctions, and those sanctions are putting Zanu PF at a disadvantage in terms of elections. And that is foreigners trying to achieve regime change in Zimbabwe. South Africa doesn't want to hear that Zanu PF has been rigging elections long before the sanctions were imposed. Zimbabwe has never had free, fair, and credible elections since independence in 1980. The sanctions were only imposed in 2001. And yet, South Africa does not want to hear that. As far as they are concerned, elections were free, fair, and credible. Until then, Zanu PF was winning them because they were free, fair, and credible. After the sanctions were imposed, it's almost like, well, Zanu PF has got the right to rig the elections because there are sanctions. The right to a meaningful vote, free, fair, and credible election is supposed to be inalienable. It's not supposed to be negotiated. It's not supposed to be in any way curtailed, depending on certain conditions. But here we are. If there are sanctions, citizens in Zimbabwe do not have a right to a free, fair, and credible election. Period. That's as far as South Africa is concerned. It is supposed to be the people of Zimbabwe who have the final say on who governs Zimbabwe in a free, fair, and credible election. And it is their prerogative and their prerogative alone, but not as far as South Africa is concerned. South Africa has since stepped in and said, as long as there are sanctions there, that right is suspended. Zanu PF can go ahead and rig the election. South Africa will argue that Zanu PF should be granted political legitimacy because it will not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. Ironically, the ANC government, their Secretary General, was interviewed on Hard Talk, on BBC Hard Talk. And he was admitting that South Africa's economy is in trouble and vowed that the ANC government will do everything to make sure that South Africa does not become a failed state. South Africa or South Africans have got the option. If they do not believe come next year's election that the ANC is doing enough to stop South Africa becoming a failed state, they will vote ANC out. The elections in South Africa are free, fair, and credible. If they don't, well, that was their decision. In Zimbabwe, we never had that opportunity. Zimbabwe has been stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime for the last 43 years. And since the imposition of the sanctions, South Africa is now telling us that we are stuck with Zanu PF because South Africa will not allow, or ANC will not allow regime change in Zimbabwe. We are stuck with Zanu PF. And thanks to the corrupt and incompetent opposition who are participating in these elections to give the process legitimacy, at least give the SADC leaders the excuse to grant Zanu PF legitimacy. So we are almost set. We already know what the results of the morning after the 23rd of August are going to be. Another Zanu PF landslide victory. How could they lose? They control every aspect of this election process. Their own man is running every aspect of the election process. How could they possibly lose? They just need people to participate, to give the process credibility, to give SADC the excuse that Zimbabweans participated in these elections freely. How Zanu PF has managed to con Zimbabweans into believing this nonsense of winning rigged elections make us believe that so many people will still believe they could win rigged elections, even after 43 years of rigged elections, Zanu PF rigging elections, make us believe. But again, like our friends in the opposition, people seem to have a very selective memory. They hear certain things, they cannot hear other things. You try to explain to them that the election process itself is so flawed, you cannot change the result. Zanu PF is only asking you to participate, to give the process credibility, and to give SADC the excuse to grant Zanu PF legitimacy. All those arguments, people don't hear them. They go in one ear, out the other. All those people who are participating in these elections will tell you that CCC is going to win big. Because that's what they want to believe. Give them all the evidence that that is not going to happen. They know that it has never happened in the past, but they still want to believe it. And to tell them otherwise is actually, they find it very irritating, some of them. They get exceptionally aggressive. They don't want to hear it. They filter. There are certain things that they want to hear. Being warned that Zanu PF is rigging the elections, they don't want to hear that. Being warned that CCC's so-called winning in rigged election strategies are just hot air, they don't want to hear that. They want to believe that CCC is going to win big, and is winning big. ZEC is not running these elections. I repeat, ZEC is not running these elections. It is Zanu PF appointed individuals, operatives who are running these elections. That is the truth. And that is the truth we have got to accept. And to deny that basic truth is being naive, to say the very least. It is tragic that 43 years after rigged elections, we still have people out there who would not believe Zanu PF is rigging the elections because they don't want to believe it. It is sad that as a nation, we're still failing to define what constitutes free, fair, and credible election. These elections affect us, ourselves, not somebody else out there. It's us. We cannot run free, fair, and credible elections for ourselves. That is a damning testimonial of failed leadership. We really are failing to govern ourselves. That is the bottom line. There is still a chance of forcing SADC, at least some of the SADC countries other than South Africa, to condemn these coming elections for what they are. Zanu PF is rigging them. There's no one who can pretend such an election that we are going through here now is free, fair, and credible. If Zanu PF is denied political legitimacy, what is going to happen next is Zimbabwe will be forced to go into a second government of national unity, comparable to the one in 2008 to 2013. Hopefully, this time we'll be smart enough to make sure that we elect, or we appoint people who are competent to implement the democratic reforms, which the last GNU failed to implement even one token reform. Implement those democratic reforms, and you'll put Zimbabwe back on a democratic footing. You will put Zimbabwe back on a position where it can now finally hold free, fair, and credible elections. And that is the very essence, the very foundation for good governance. I'm not saying that you will have a competent government the first time, but the advantage with it is if those who get elected fail to perform, as long as you maintain the democratic values for free, fair, and credible elections, you can remove them from office and elect somebody else. Zimbabwe will be a young democracy, but once it's born, it can start growing and get better and better. We begin to understand what policies are and begin to understand the importance of electing competent leaders and be able to analyze and scrutinize those who are just offering cheap solutions that do not work. Zimbabwe can finally start on the recovery path. At the present moment, these elections are not going to get us off that ground. Like I said, Zanu PF is rigging these elections. CCC is participating in these elections, knowing fully well that the elections will be rigged, knowing fully well that by participating, they give SADC the excuse to give Zanu PF legitimacy. They are participating regardless out of greed. They are after the few seats that Zanu PF is offering. And some of those candidates who are going to stand in the presidential race, they are after the free speech that are going to be given out to the losing presidential candidates out of the Pollard arrangement. All they've got to do is swear that Mnangagwa, the elections were free, fair, and credible, and Mnangagwa is the legitimate president. And their membership of Pollard is confirmed. And the benefits of being in Pollard will start to flow. The ordinary person is getting absolutely nothing out of these elections, as usual. All we'll get is another 5 years of a corrupt, incompetent Zanu PF dictatorship with an opposition that pretends that they're making a world of difference in parliament, knowing fully well to all they're making in parliament is noise, because Zanu PF can do whatever it damn well pleases, as long as it has got the majority. And that majority is secure during these elections. They've got the bodies there to make sure the election delivers a Zanu PF landslide victory. That is the purpose of those appointees in cabinet, in ZEC. It is unbelievable that people would give up the right, their fundamental right to free, fair, and credible elections, to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, to accept something so frivolous and idiotic as these opportunities to win in rigged elections. The belief that you could win rigged elections. In other words, you have accepted that Zanu PF can rig those elections, and now you have got to fight your chance to win those rigged elections. Why would you want to do that? Zanu PF does not have the right to rig elections. So the idea is to reject. That is not acceptable. All this nonsense about MDC coming up with these winning in rigged election strategies is all nonsense. We do not need strategies to win rigged elections. We need to implement reforms so that elections are free, fair, and credible from the word go. That is what we need. Get that, and you will get Zimbabwe finally back on track on a democratic path. And as a new democratic nation, we can start building our democracy, strengthening it with each election, electing more and more competent people, and who can finally start addressing the nation's teething problems. It can be done. Other nations can do it. South Africa itself can do it. South Africa itself has been having free, fair, and credible elections since 1994. And yet, it's interesting to note that South Africa here is willing to encourage Zimbabwe to have Zanu PF rig the elections and then endorse them as, give them a political credibility on the basis that as long as there are sanctions there, Zimbabwe, it's not Zimbabwe's fault. And South Africa is not going to permit regime change in the country. I think we have got to also register our displeasure at South Africa's position, the ANC's position on that issue. It is totally unacceptable. South Africa has no right to dictate that Zimbabweans have lost all their fundamental right to a meaningful election just because there are sanctions. Sanctions have been imposed on the regime. That is totally unacceptable. ANC has no right to do that. And we must make sure that they hear our protestation and our displeasure at that position. That is totally unacceptable. There is a chance to fight, I repeat, there is a chance to stop Zanu PF getting legitimacy. That is our only hope to get back on track. That is a fight worth having. Food for thought. Thank you and good night.